Starting our California edition, I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest again, his name is Curt Hagman. He is a member of the California State Assembly. He's also the floor leader for the Republican Party in the Assembly. Thanks for joining us, sir. We appreciate it. I want to speak with you about workers' compensation. It's not a conversation I'd expect to be having, but it focuses upon what we know as a cumulative trauma, and it's a unique principle in our state. What does the concept of cumulative trauma mean?
It means if you do something repeatedly, like if you're a contractor and you're swinging the hammer, and after 30 years of swinging the hammer, you have a shoulder injury.
Right.
But it's not a particular incident that did it. That whole lifetime of working can leave you for a workers' comp claim.
And the way you describe it, it's not necessarily a bad thing, as I hear it. The problem, as I understand it, is there's some abuse of the system as it relates to cumulative trauma and where that cumulative trauma occurred.
Correct. Now, just by definition, there's not one incident where it occurred. So what we're seeing, and this is the only state, California is the only state that gives this benefit for workers' comp.
Cumulative trauma.
Correct. And so what we're seeing, a few very smart attorneys got together and started to go through the list of retired professional athletes, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, and saying, well, you've been retired for 20 years, but if you played at least one game or suited up at least for one practice in California, you know you never lived there or you never played for a California team, we get you $200,000 or $300,000 from the owners of the team. So
that is stunning. That is stunning on so many levels because, look, if an Oakland Raider wants to file a claim, okay, I get it. Even an LA Ram, if they were Rams before we went to St. Louis, okay. But we're talking about players who never were on California teams.
Correct. But they could have came and played one game in California in their career. So maybe a 2-year career, it could be 20 years down the line. And they say, well, when I played football, I have sore knees now, come pay me.
So the cumulative trauma didn't necessarily occur in California. It occurred throughout the nation.
Correct, wherever the team happened.
Do other states? Well, I guess other states don't have cumulative trauma, so I couldn't even ask you the question. Do other states have this issue of length of employment period?
Correct. So they all have the right to file workers' comp claims in their own state, and maybe for a specific injury due to their work.
So if they played for the Ravens, they could file in Maryland, presumably.
But they could also file in Maryland and California now. And so like I said, it went up by 5,000% in the last couple of years.
This very issue,
Only with athletes. They're going through the rosters and calling everybody and say file it. And it hurts all California business because we all pay an administration fee called CEGA on each one of our workers' comp policies. It takes up the court time from our workers going in there. And the actual monetary payout, which 99+% are taking cash out of the system, are walking home with it.
And we have to remember that we all pay workers' comp insurance through our employer. And so it's not as if this isn't hurting all of us. I mean, we know what happens with workers' comp rates. I mean, you did have workers' comp reform last year.
We're the highest in the United States right now. So
even with the workers' comp reforms of the last decade, let's say.
Correct.
Okay, why don't you tell us about an athlete? He's well-liked. His name is Jerry Hill. Why don't you tell
Jerry Rice, I believe.
Jerry Rice. I don't know.
Yeah,
Jerry
he played
Hill's
for
a member, I think.
San Francisco. Well, I was asked by a reporter about the issue up in San Francisco reporter, and they did research, and he got a payout, I think roughly $250,000, $300,000 the year before he was on Dancing with the Stars.
Oh my.
So, hopefully this legislation we're proposing this year will at least take care of the abuses and make it where, workers' comp is a safety net that we want for our workers here to take care of them, but not to have just cash payouts when you retire later.
And what's interesting is I have seen press conferences. The athletes are not taking this lying down. I mean, they really are trying to protect this right. They are going to the public and demanding that this legislation be halted. They're trying to use the bully pulpit.
This is pulled in all the different unions, and it's going to be one of the biggest fights in the Capitol this year on the very specific issue of abuse. And it's going to be interesting this year.
What do your friends on the Democratic side of the aisle say?
Well, I'm the vice chair of insurance, and my chair, I was going to pull the legislation of my own last year, but I got my chair involved.
Who's your chair?
Henry Pereira.
Okay.
So Henry and I are both co-authoring this legislation.
Okay.
This is a bipartisan bill.
So what do you think?
I'm very hopeful that it gets out next week, and after that we have to worry about the floor.
Do you have a friend on the Senate side handling it?
Not yet, but we're working on it. We have a lot of very sympathetic folks in the legislature. We don't like abuses. We want to take care of our folks, but we don't want to abuse the system.
And so what the bill is saying is that you need to have worked a certain % of time in our state to be able to claim cumulative injury?
Yeah, and if you come out later, let's say you have a brain injury, you find out 10 years after you retire, well, we'll give you a year from the time you diagnose that to actually file a claim here in California too. So there's a lot of escape off-ramps.
Right.
We just want the people who have been retired for 20 years, all of a sudden, hey, let's go find some California, get some
But
cash.
let me ask you, is it time to look at whether we want to provide relief for cumulative injury? I mean, you said 49 other states don't offer it.
Yes, we are the only state that did it. It's only been out for a decade. And
Oh, it was
a fairly
added 10
new
years
thing,
ago.
correct. And it's, attorneys are very smart. They find ways to
Right.
abuse the system, and I believe this is abuse. I would like to see further, maybe, looking at it. You know, is there something there? Maybe, but in all professions, we have inherent risk.
And so where do we go from here?
Well, we have a committee on the 24th. They're coming
Okay.
up, and we'll see if it gets out of insurance committee. And after that, we go directly to the floor, and then off to the Senate side. So
Okay.
I'm very, very optimistic we'll get it out.
I want to shift gears and talk about Prop 39. There was a lot of media focused on Prop 30, which was a half-cent sales tax that passed, surprisingly to some, with 55% of the vote. But lower down on the ballot, there was something called Prop 39. And Prop 39 closed a loophole that allowed corporations to classify whether they were in-state or out-of-state, and it's giving the state an additional about $1 billion. But under Prop 39, the money for the first 5 years, a portion of it must be spent in schools on clean energy programs.
Well, any civic buildings actually is technically
Oh, is this,
correct.
okay, well, thank you for that. So talk to us about that. I know Senator
Sure.
De Leon has been traveling the state, looking at how the money can best be spent. Where do we stand on Prop 39?
Yeah, well, I also have introduced a legislation that passed out of committee so far. So there's like 7 bills. And luckily, we're all focused on the same benefactor, and that's education,
Right.
both higher and lower. And obviously, we're with our 33% renewable energy guidelines and all our other very aggressive green energy stuff we're doing here in the state, our energy prices going up. So we're trying to give some relief to our schools by letting them buy, LED light bulbs, by replacing their air conditioning, by doing things that hopefully conserve on their operational cost, for long term, and hopefully saves a little bit more money for education.
I've been to a few schools. I remember I was at a school in Orange County. It was called like Top of the Hill. I can't remember the exact name. And they had solar panels on the roof. And what was so remarkable about this school is that the solar panels were collecting so much sunlight that they were giving money back to the grid, and therefore they were making money. Is that something that a school can do under Prop 39? It seems like it'd be a huge win-win.
Yes, it's you come up with an energy audit before, you do whatever improvements you think is best for your school, and then you come up with an energy audit. As long as you saved energy, you basically qualify for this program. Now, people may think $500 million is a lot of money each year. It's not. I sit on the state
understand.
allocation board.
You
We
know.
spend billions of dollars each year on just school maintenance. But at least it's a seed money. It gets them thinking about it. The best practices may be determined by it. And if it saves enough money, maybe some of these schools can do that on their own. Pay off over 3 years, but have the benefits from thereafter.
I want to talk to you about your status in the California State Assembly. As you know, it was a tough year in 2012 for Assembly Republicans, Senate Republicans, and there was a fear that the Democrats, who would now hold a 2/3 majority in both houses, would exclude the Republicans, ramrod the Republicans. How's it been?
For me, it's actually been quite the opposite.
good.
We had 38 new members out of 80 this year,
Right.
both for Democrats and Republicans. And so far, it's been logic and reason and has been instituted back in the Capitol. It's been a very good start. I hope it continues that way.
And so you feel as if your friends on the Democratic side, even though they do arguably hold all the cards, that they're looking for bipartisan solutions. They're not looking to just shut out the minority in a way that marginalizes them.
No more than we have been in the past.
Right. It's not any worse.
It's not any worse, correct. Really, the only thing that's changed is we go override the veto on their own without us, the veto of the governor, and they can also pass tax increases on their
But
own.
we haven't seen that.
But they already passed 2 largest ones. We are the largest tax state
Prop
in the
30?
nation. Prop 30 and then 39 both just passed. And so we've heard they're not going to introduce any more tax measures this year.
We'll see.
We'll see next year.
He's Curt Hagman, member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance. You're watching Charter California Edition. This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Michael Touhey. He has had quite a year. In November, he was elected to the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. He had served on the West Covina City Council. He was named Secretary Treasurer of that district, and most recently, he was appointed to the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Sir, congratulations. The MWD, give us a sense of what the MWD is and its import in California.
Well, we're pretty much the one designated to us in the State Water Project to getting water to all of Southern California, 20 million retail customers that we sell to we are a wholesaler and we sell to the water companies within those areas.
So explain what the MWD does vis-a-vis the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, vis-a-vis the water companies, and then to the customer.
The Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, we're one of like a franchise. They sell water to us. To the
Upper San Gabriel?
The Upper San Gabriel, and then we sell it to the retail providers, which may be a City of Azusa, Suburban Water, Golden State Water, whatever, La Puente Valley County Water.
And then the City of Azusa, for example, will provide it to the consumer.
Correct.
So where does the Metropolitan Water District get its water?
We get it from the Bay Delta. We get it through water not all used in the State Water Project. They have to sell it if it's within Southern California. Any water agency has to sell it back to us. We buy all surplus State Water Project water, and the Colorado River Aqueduct, which we control and operate.
So let's break that down. The Bay Delta. The Bay Delta has been a thorny subject for years. We all remember the misery of the, I'm blanking on the name, the canal, the Peripheral Canal Project.
Correct.
Now Governor Brown is back as governor, and there's discussions about, I don't want to call it a peripheral canal, but somehow upgrading the Bay Delta to allow for greater access, safety, should there be a natural calamity. What can you tell us about what's happening with the Bay Delta Conservation Project?
We're proposing a twin pipeline system to take it above the Delta area right before the water goes through the Delta to provide for safe, consistent water for Southern California. That's very important. Also within the Bay Delta plan is a tremendous amount of money set aside for restoration,
now,
which we're working
this
with
plan, as envisioned, is a $23 billion project, as I understand it. This plan is separate and apart from the water bond that we have heard about over the last few election cycles. It's still not officially on any ballot yet. It was supposed to be in 2010, then 2012. So focused on the Bay Delta, not the water bond, where is this $23 billion going to come from, as you understand it?
We will pay for it, and we will pay for it through our rates.
The ratepayers.
Correct. MWD, first of all, and we will pass it on to the agencies that buy from us. But it is 100% not a direct taxpayer-funded situation like a bond.
Why?
Because people always have problems with that because they say it's only for Southern California.
I see.
And it becomes more of a what's happening in the water industry. It always becomes Northern California versus Southern California. And then we have our own fights here locally between Southern California and the San Diego area.
So if we can engage in the Bay Delta Conservation Project separate and apart from the taxpayers through a bond, why do we need a bond? Couldn't we do the same for the projects that are in the bond?
There are many different things within the bond that talk about recycling water in certain areas, water cleanup, water storage, which is separate from getting the water here. We also need the ability to store the water, and some of the money within the water bond pays for storage. We have a large storage basin here, which very important to have water stored in your area in case we have an emergency. If we ever do have a major earthquake and any of those levees break along the Bay Delta, we will not be pumping water for 4 to 5 years from that area, and we're going to have to survive without that water, because the seawater will come into the Bay Delta and cause tremendous problems, like what happened in New Orleans.
Right, but here's the question, and I don't want to sound as if I'm an alarmist, but as I understand it, it's not if, but when.
No question.
No question that we will have a massive earthquake. Will that earthquake cause the levees to breach? Is that in question?
I don't believe it is. I believe that's the problem I personally have when it becomes a Northern California, Southern California fight. Southern California is going to be taxed to fix the Northern California problem here shortly, because we all know an earthquake is going to happen of some magnitude, and we could have a breach. And if that's the case, just like with the Golden Gate Bridge, all of Californians, even though it doesn't benefit all of Californians, have to pitch in and help out. And that's how we have to look at this. And I think sometimes Northern California and Southern California look at it as opposites.
Right.
We don't get along without them. They don't get along without us.
Well, what about the bond? I mean, the bond's separate and apart from the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. It was supposed to be on the ballot in 2010. It's supposed to be on the ballot in 2012.
It keeps on getting bumped. It's actually down right now. I think they're pushing it down around to 7.9 billion.
It was going to be 11.
Correct, because they're trying to get it sellable for the 2014 election cycle, and all the different agencies across California, working with the state legislature and the governor, are trying to find out what is acceptable to everyone, what has enough things in it. Everyone hates hearing the word like earmarks.
Of course.
But there are certain things that we don't consider water cleanup in our area, or recycle water. That's not really, in my mind, an earmark. We have the largest contamination plume in the United States right under your ground here.
Right.
And
we're in Irwindale today.
And it's the Baldwin Park Operable Unit, and it's a for real thing, and it was done by the federal government through Aerojet, which was one of the major polluters when they were making rocket jet fuel.
But what's interesting, you mentioned, what is someone's earmark is someone else's job.
Correct.
And so, it's easy to point fingers at, these projects that are allegedly pork, but someone eats the bacon in the end.
That is what we're trying to, you have to look at it overall as a whole. For one, water cleanup and water quality should be at the utmost importance to everybody. That should not be viewed as an earmark.
Right.
Water sustainability, to keep Southern California operating, we are the financial economic engine. We need the water, and as you see, we're having the worst rainfall in recorded history.
Huge drought.
The drought
right now.
is ridiculous.
Right.
The Eastern Sierra snowpack is down to its lowest level it has been in recorded history, and we're having the same problem on the opposite end of our water delivery system at the Colorado River Aqueduct. We're having the lowest rainfall in recorded history on that side. So on both sides of Southern California, we're dry.
And let's talk about the Colorado River, because as I understand it, MWD gets a huge portion of its water from that aqueduct, and yet the infrastructure is aging and needs replacement.
We are working on that actively. We've been working on our pump station at Lake Havasu that pumps the water for the Colorado River Aqueduct. And for the first time in 10 years, we have all 8 pumps working right now. But we had a shutdown not too long ago to get our system up and going. But we're operating on all cylinders, but you can only pump what water you're allowed to take. We have approximately 500,000 acre feet in Lake Mead, and Lake Mead is almost so low that we're not going to be allowed to pump water, even though we have water stored up there that we own. Because Nevada and Arizona, there's going to be a fight between California.
Are we getting close to conditions whereby we're going to have to start rationing?
We're not sure if we're there yet. We just need to keep on working on water transfers, which the MWD is doing. We just bought 50,000 acre feet of water from Mexico. Because of the Delta smelt in the Bay Delta. We let 800,000 gallons of water, 800,000 acre feet of water go out to the ocean, because we have a kill limit. We can kill maximum 305 Delta smelt.
Michael Touhey, I want to thank you for joining us. Very insightful. Please come back.
Absolutely.
He's Michael Touhey. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition. Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're still with us. We are speaking with Habib Balian. He is the CEO of the Metro Gold Line Foothill Extension Construction Authority, which is what?
It's a special purpose entity that is designed to build the project from Union Station all the way to the county line.
County line, LA,
LA,
San Bernardino.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was determined in 1998 by the California legislature that the project was not getting built on any kind of schedule, although there were funds available for the project. So the legislature stepped in, then State Senator Adam Schiff headed the charge to take the project away from Metro, carve it out, all the rights and responsibilities for the project, and give it to a special purpose entity. And our job is to just build this project for the ultimate use of Metro. So we build it for Metro, and they operate it long term.
So, for example, right now, Phase 1 is operational. That's Union Station to Pasadena, opened in 2003. Who operates it?
Metro operates it.
Not the authority.
Not the authority.
So once you build, you pass it off.
Exactly.
Not a bad gig.
Not bad
Not
at
so
all.
bad. But the exciting news is once that line opened, the authority, the state, was able to gather funds to build what's known as Phase 2A. Where did those funds come from?
Well, voters in 2008 decided to tax themselves through Measure R.
Right.
And in Measure R, there was $810 million set aside for this project. And it's roughly enough to get us through Phase 2A, which is Pasadena to Azusa.
And that was a half-cent sales tax increase passed as the county, the state, the nation was going through the beginning of a recession, but the voters were generous. And so you have started construction. I mean, this is happening.
That's right.
You got 400 guys and gals out there.
Yes.
So tell us more about 2A. Where is it going, and what is the import of it?
Well, 2A runs from Arcadia, through Arcadia, from Pasadena, over the 210 freeway. You may have seen the bridge that was built over the
Yes.
I-210. And it lands on the south side of the freeway and continues eastward through Arcadia on the historic railroad right-of-way.
Nice.
And it goes all through all the cities of Arcadia, Monrovia, Duarte, Irwindale, and then to Azusa. And it hits all of the major centers of each of those cities, and we're anticipating a great deal of development ultimately around all of these stations once we're done.
This is terrific on many levels. When I think about the 210 freeway, the 10 freeway, which actually in those San Gabriel regions are not that far from each other, you know, they are severely impacted. And they're fairly wide freeways anyway. They just opened Fast Track, but it's still severely impacted. So people will be able to use those lines to get into, I guess would be the western San Gabriel Valley, and then to downtown.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the money.
Exactly.
So what's the distance from Union Station to Pass?
It's about 14 miles.
And then from Pass to Azusa?
About 11 and a half miles,
This
and
is-
then
this is
another
a-
12 and a half miles all the way to Montclair.
And let's talk about that,
Sure.
because that's Phase 2B.
Yes.
Phase 2B, like you said, Azusa to Montclair. There's a question mark on Phase 2B. Is that a fair statement, Habib?
Yes. We have about $30 million available to us to do the design and construction. From residual dollars from Measure R.
Okay.
Measure R had $810 million. We're using most of it for the construction of 2A. The residual amount, which is actually about $60 million, about 30 of that we'll use specifically for design and engineering of the next phase of
And
the
have
project.
we started design and engineering?
We've environmentally cleared it
Okay.
about a month ago.
Oh,
and now we'll start.
congratulations.
Thank you. It's a big hurdle for the authority.
Clearly. Do you have to go
And
through CEQA and everything?
We went through CEQA.
EIR, the whole thing?
EIR,
All
the
the
whole
challenges are done?
Challenges are not done, and
But-
we are actually being challenged
Okay.
by the city of Pomona. The city
Really?
of Pomona would like us to build a grade separation in Pomona where we don't believe it's warranted.
Let's talk about grade separation, if I may. I'm going to back up a bit.
Okay.
Recently, as part of Phase 2A, there was a groundbreaking in Arcadia that dealt with grade separation. But something happened that was really unique to the situation. Explain it to us.
Sure, that's a good example. Pomona, in this instance, who's challenging the EIR, they want us to put a grade separation where grade separation is not warranted, where we do analysis of the intersection and understand what impacts we're going to have. It wasn't warranted in Pomona. In the same case in Arcadia, it wasn't warranted at Santa Anita Avenue. In the city of Arcadia.
Who decides if it's warranted?
Well, there's a procedure of specifications that you go through to decide if it meets a threshold.
I see.
And we do the mathematics around that, and we decide if it's necessary or not. Arcadia, it wasn't necessary. The citizens of Arcadia, led by the city council, decided to put the measure on the ballot, a local ballot for the city, and through their own initiative, they raised $13 million and are paying for their own grade separation.
That seems like a win-win.
It's a win-win. It's
Right.
great for the authority. We're happy to build it as part of our project.
Sure.
There's a lot of efficiency having us do it, doing it now, and they're benefiting long-term.
And so did that pass with a 2/3 vote?
I passed with a 2/3 vote.
Which is quite remarkable.
Yes.
And that brings us up to the question of Measure J. Now, Measure J was on the ballot in November. What it would have done is extend Measure R's half-cent sales tax another 30 years. It needed 66.6% of the vote. It got 66.1% of the vote. It lost by under 20,000 votes. Aside from the unique situation as it relates to the authority, which I'll get to in a moment, where do we stand on the question of these 2/3 majority for these types of transportation projects?
Well, right now, as you know, there's a 2/3 requirement for any of these dedicated sales tax increases, these measures. I was actually in Sacramento yesterday.
Oh, my.
We met with a lot of our legislators' staffs, and this is a big topic for them. Senator Carol Liu is carrying legislation right now.
Who represents this San Gabriel Valley?
Exactly. She's very interested in transit. She's very interested in helping us out, and she's carrying a bill that will benefit all these projects if the threshold is lowered.
And that's the question. Should the threshold be lowered to 55%, 50%, as you know, with school bonds, as long as it deals with construction? It can be lowered to, the threshold's 55%.
Right.
But there is something unique, though, about Measure J. I guess it's fair to say you weren't severely depressed by its failure because...
Well, we weren't included in Measure J.
Why?
Now, Measure J would have raised about $90 billion, and it lost by 14,000 votes.
Right.
So that's really horrendous for the county. It's
Right.
unfortunate. We like to think that if we were included in there, if there was more consensus,
Oh,
they would have met that
interesting.
threshold.
Interesting.
So we're gonna be very hopeful for the next go round, whether it happens in 2 years or 4 years,
Right.
that we're included in there, and
But
we think that's the way you build consensus.
What about those that would say, we already have this sales tax for 30 years. It's only 4 years after you passed it. Why do we need another 30 years? Explain.
Well, I think originally Metro made the assumption that there was going to be a lot of federal dollars available for these projects. And I think that was a pretty fair analysis of the future. These projects cost billions of dollars, as you can imagine, to build. And their program is probably worth $20 billion over the next 20 years or so. So they had an expectation that there were going to be federal dollars, and Mayor Villaraigosa had an
Of Los
initiative
Angeles.
of Los Angeles, made it one of his causes, and he...
That was what's known as 30-10.
That's right, he was
where-
trying to build 30 years worth of projects inside of 10 years.
by getting essentially loan guarantees
Exactly.
from the feds.
Right.
Didn't
And
happen.
It didn't happen. The funding wasn't available. It was something that wasn't done enough in this broadly.
And it's interesting. It looked like it was going to happen when the Democrats ruled the roost. Once the Republicans took over the House, that's when it kind of came to a halt. I know that you've been involved in Republican politics throughout the years. I mean, you're neutral now is in what you do, but have you spoken with kind of Republican colleagues on this issue? Because I have to think that your voice would be heard loudly.
Well, I think there's an attitude in Washington that the need in Los Angeles is so big and the commitments to Los Angeles are so big that it could impact other regions of the country. I think California and Los Angeles has not received its fair share over the last decade.
We send more
we
than
send
we
more
get
in,
back,
exactly.
aside from transportation. Okay, so quickly, if I may, so much to talk about. 2B funding, that is Azusa to Montclair. Where are we today?
So we have the $30 million for design
Right.
engineering. We'll start that effort next year. It's about 2 years worth of work to do. We'll get to a point where we can actually properly estimate the project and be able to go to the federal government and to the state and start looking for funds. It's about $950 million for that part of the project.
Any thoughts of public-private partnerships? As you know, Governor Brown was in China recently. I know he was more focused on high-speed rail, but who knows?
Public-private partnerships are very difficult with transit. It's been my experience and the way I look at it. Control of the fare box is very difficult for these local agencies to
understand.
give up, and to put the responsibility of fares in a private investor's hands it's very tricky to do.
His name is Habib Balian. He is the CEO of the Metro Gold Line Foothill Extension Construction Authority. My name is Brad Pomerance. You're watching Charter California.